What's going on, fellas? By the request of Paris, we're putting in the next installation in the exercises I think you should be doing series. The series where we drop a little bit of the nuance. I tell you something I think should probably be in your program. If you want to, you take my word for it. You put some effort into it over the next couple of weeks. Hopefully, after busting your ass on it, you start to see the benefits that I'm going to purport it offers, and then you keep it in there. So just kind of a practical takeaway, not this super vague, zoomed out platitudes that are correct that you have to kind of think yourself. More of a just, hey, I think you should probably be doing this shit. I think it'll work. You should give it a go. Because I always wish there was more videos like that when I was learning, just to give me the kind of go ahead to gain more practical experience, right? Because I'm sure you guys have heard many of us in this space say, hey, just try it and see what happens. But there's so many things to try that it's almost paralyzing to, I don't even know what to try. So I'm telling you something to try if you haven't already tried it. So far in the exercises I think you should be doing, off the top of my head, we have talked about the benefits of including unilateral work to supplement extra squat pattern volume while also getting those unilateral benefits of challenging the adductor and the abductor musculature, running up some extra volume, blah, blah, blah. Lots of cool stuff there. I think I have mentioned knee flexion, the idea that we're doing this very knee extension heavy main lift in whatever our main squat is. If we believe antagonistic work is important, we should probably do some kind of knee flexion after we do our squats. So generally speaking, when I finish up squatting, I like to always have some glute ham raises in there, or maybe some hamstring curls in there. However many working sets I did on squats, I would like to do that many on the glute ham raise, kind of following this principle of structural symmetry. The 1-to-1 ratio doesn't really matter, but I do like to have that present. I believe I talked about back extensions and hip thrusts as a way to run up additional hip hinging volume when you probably couldn't handle more productive pulling from the floor or RDLs or these bigger scale motions. We can use these lower scale motions such as like single leg RDLs, back extensions, 45-degree back extensions, reverse hypers, hip thrusts to run up more hypertrophy in that hinging pattern to supplement our main deadlifting work. And then I think we've talked about vertical pulling, basically just to try to build up the upper back to a bit more than what we would get from just doing our squat, bench, deadlift. So today what I wanted to talk about is daily core work, daily midsection work, right? There's kind of two different categories of where I put this stuff. The first one is going to be things where we're moving from point A to point B. So something like a GHD sit-up, something like a hanging leg raise, something like a reverse squat on a cable machine, if you guys have seen Knees Over Toes guy do those. We're moving from point A to B. So we have this variable resistance curve. We're using our abs as a mover, but we're also using the hip flexors a good bit. And these are exercises that lend themselves to training for repetitions, right? We can count 8 to 12 reps, right? I generally like to pair those because if we think about it, those are the opposite of a hip hinge. Kind of the same idea as when I squat, I would like to do at least a couple of sets of knee flexion, glute ham raise being my go-to, or an assisted Nordic machine if you have one, because those are awesome. Same idea is for every working set I do of deadlifts. I would like to see at least one working set of like a glute ham or a glute GHD sit-up, hanging leg raise, or like a reverse squat. To hypertrophy both the abs and the hip flexors, kind of get in that antagonistic work, maintain some semblance of structural symmetry, blah, blah, blah. That's cool. We get a lot of hypertrophy out of that. But that is actually not what I'm going to recommend you try. I mean, you could try that, and I would recommend it, but this video centers around the daily ab work. That's the reverse hinging work that I'll pair with any time I'm doing a heavy hinge, but we're going to talk more about the volume that's done directly for the midsection and my kind of take on it. So lots of people would say, oh, well, you're getting core work from your squatting and your deadlifting. Is that enough? And hypothetically, yeah, when you do an exercise for a varied rep range, it's going to build up the muscles associated with that movement pattern in the correct proportions to one another. You're going to get some work for your core, especially if we're doing some kind of care-loaded movement for strongman with yokes and farmers and sandbag carries. We're going to get another step up in terms of how much our midsection is being stimulated, but I'm a vocal advocate for doing a bit more than just that. I find that having a bit of a surplus in strength and development of our midsection lets us handle more training volume. Usually it helps people with having a better understanding of how to brace effectively if we just are doing a little bit of extra homework. Now, from a hypertrophy perspective, I think that those things we're supersetting or doing after our deadlifts that we're doing for repetitions, those are the move. Those are probably going to get us whatever strength and hypertrophy qualities we're looking for in our core are probably going to happen from those GHD sit-ups, from those hanging leg raises. But the physical quality that I'm most concerned with my core is strength endurance, right? So it's not pure endurance. There's going to be a time domain that we work within, but I'm a big advocate for training the midsection for this strength endurance task. In the past, I've tried to develop maximal strength of my midsection, and it really didn't do a whole lot for me. It wasn't until I pivoted to training for strength endurance that I really started to notice this difference in the quality of my brace and how stable I felt under the weights. So usually what I recommend is every day that you're in the gym training, you do one exercise for anti-extension and one exercise for like anti-lateral flexion / anti-rotation. So you're going to come into the gym, whether it's an upper body day, a full body day, a lower body day, a bro split day. If you're lifting weights that day, you're doing a little bit of core work, because our ability to effectively transfer weight in the bar is kind of predicated on having a very efficient transfer of force through that often weak link in the chain in the center. Our low back portion of that kind of cylinder is going to be strong from just doing squats and deadlifts. It probably doesn't need that much extra work. If we're doing our bent rows, our deadlifts, our RDLs, our squats, we're probably going to have a pretty strong lower back. If you don't, you could run up some extra volume with back extensions or reverse hypers, and that's fine. But we're mostly looking to develop that little bit of a surplus in development to the sides and to the front. So as far as the front, the anti-extension, usually I recommend people work off of this idea of working within a 1 minute time domain, right? So we're working our way up until we can do a certain exercise or a certain weight for 1 minute, and then we could look to progress or look to make it a little bit harder in some way. So the most common one I'll recommend is doing a front plank where we're locking our ribs down. We're kind of posteriorly tucking our pelvis. We're actually trying to think about reaching our lower back up towards the ceiling to lock in this kind of braced position that we might look to duplicate when we're lifting weights. So it's not just this passive kind of hanging, letting our back arch kind of plank. It's a really active crunching into it, reaching that low back up towards the ceiling into this more difficult position. Building each day, you do your plank to try to get a little further, all within maintaining these good positions. You get a nice little core pump. It's going to feel good when you go to squat or deadlift. You have a little bit easier time kind of filling that lower abdomen with air and feeling it pushing against your abs. If you get that light pump, once we can get to a minute, you could grab a backpack and throw a 25-pound plate in it. And it's nice if you wear the backpack nice and low, the plate will be on your low back, and you can think about pushing that low back into the plate. And then we could go to 2 25-pound plates. Eventually, you might outgrow planks, but if we're doing them in this very difficult way, you probably will still be able to get good work out of them. Just one set every single day. We're doing these. If you're at a strongman gym, you can have your training partner put a sandbag on your back to progress past what could fit in the backpack. If you're having a hard time getting good work out of these planks, you're either very good at them or you can't really get a feel for what position you're supposed to maintain. The other two that I like to throw into this exercise slot are going to be a hollow hold. Again, we'll have our hands above our head. We have our feet raised up off the ground. You can search these up if you can't imagine it. And again, we're kind of pushing that low back into the ground. We're focusing on breathing low into the stomach. Same thing on the front plank. We're just using this as an opportunity to focus on breathing down into the stomach rather than up into the chest, breathing into those obliques, breathing air so it's pushing backwards into your low back. And I know that sounds very vague and abstract and bullshit, but kind of getting a feel for that ability to breathe into my lower back made it so I could suddenly handle far more deadlifting than I could in the past, and quite heavy and quite often, because the demands on my spinal erector suddenly went down because I learned to brace a little bit better. So you can do hollow holds if you can't really get a feel for the front planks, or you could do dead bugs for time. We're at the top of each rep. Again, we're pushing low back into the ground. We're not letting that low back leave the ground as we reach with the opposite leg and hand. We go all the way to tapping the floor, but making sure we're keeping that pressure, but keeping that brace, working within these domains of 1 minute. You can add weight holding up in your hands on the hollow hold. You can add weight. You can hold a dumbbell in each hand for the dead bugs, or you can hold a band with the dead bugs. There's lots of ways to make these more difficult if we can hit that 1 minute time domain. And then we're also going to hit 1 minute of side plank. As you are able to do it easily, we could put a dumbbell on the hip, gradually progress that dumbbell. And as we develop these strength endurance qualities, within this 1 minute time domain, day after day after day. You could do like a pal-off press for the oblique side of things. You could also do a suitcase carry for 1 minute. If you want to mix things up, because we're doing these every day, they might get a little bit mundane, but pretty quickly you'll acclimate to them. They'll function as just a warm-up for your main compounds, but we're getting in 5, assuming you're in the gym 5 days a week, we're getting in 5 working sets that you wouldn't otherwise be getting. And I think within 1 to 2 weeks, you'll start to feel how much more sturdy you feel under the squat and how much better of a core tightness you can generate before you lock into position on the deadlift and you initiate the pull. And I think that it's not as much about going crazy and getting these crazy performance metrics. Like, I don't care to go do a 500-pound plank for 1 minute. I don't think that would make me that much better. It's more about checking that box every single training day of challenging that, developing this good mind-muscle connection with my core, keeping this endurance in my core, and using that as an opportunity to practice breathing low into my stomach, breathing into the obliques, breathing low into the low back, breathing forward, so that 360-degree expansion. It's more about checking that box day after day after day of stimulating the core, so that way we have this nice little surplus of development. We have a good mind-muscle connection. We practice our bracing for a dedicated bit of time every day, and also we just keep that threshold of midsection endurance relatively high. We don't need to progress this to be amazing at it, right? That would probably, if we were going so hard to get these ultra heavy suitcase carries and front planks, it would probably detract from the things that we're actually trying to get better at. So we don't want to lose the forest for the trees, but we do want to work hard and we want to get in this repeated stimulation of the midsection on top of our regular training. And we're not really looking for hypertrophy from these exercises. Isometric stuff probably isn't the best for hypertrophy. We're going to get our hypertrophy primarily from that stuff we're doing to the antagonistic deadlift work. So yeah, that would be my recommendation. Train your core every single training day for a 1 minute time domain. If you find that's insufficient, you could move to 2 sets of each, or if you train 3 or 4 days a week, you might find that 2 sets per session gets you more in that threshold of where you're getting the benefit. And then we don't really need to go much past that threshold of getting the benefit because we'll probably be detracting from the training economy. We could commit to things that are more important. We're just trying to check a box there.